Welcome back to the other side of the cell. This is Michael Jackson coming at you with another video. Um, I got a lot of questions about what's the difference between jail and prison. So I thought I'd break that down to you and in this video. So first off, just to start off, the difference between jail and prison are when you first get arrested, you always go to jail first. And jail is where many different types of people are housed, and it can be misdemeanors, felonies, all that stuff is mixed into jail. And then in jail, you're going to have pretrial misdemeanors, pretrial felons. Then you have sentence inmates. So you're going to have a mixture of different types of people. Also, when the difference between jail and prison, jail is where people that are housed for usually a year or less. Prison is always a minimum of a year or more. So when you go to jail, you're going to be around people that are getting ready to they're arrested for something. Then they have to go to the magistrate or judge, and they start that process. And then at some point in time, you're going to you could be in jail for a year before anything is going to happen, or you're waiting to go to trial or something like that. So when you're in jail, that's the big distinction. You're there for either till you make bond or you go to trial, get found guilty, and then if you're found guilty, then you're going to go on to prison. Prison is after all that stuff is done, then you're sentenced, and once you become sentenced, then you're processed and moved to an actual prison to start your sentence. So that's the main difference between the two. I discussed the time thing. The time is always going to be a year or less for jail, and a year or more, or up to life when you go to prison. Now in jail, there's just a lot of things, moving parts in jail, because people are coming and going, people getting booked in, all that kind of stuff. But in jail, let's just say jobs. Jobs in jail are different than jobs in prison. Because usually jobs in jail don't pay anything, because you're just doing that to work off time or trying to be a trustee or whatever, and you don't really get paid much, or in some cases not at all. Now in prison, when you come to prison and you start to work in prison, prison is the jobs you get paid for. You don't get paid a lot for. In some cases, people even say it's like slave wages, because you might get a janitor's job, cleaning a dorm or something, or living area, and you might only make $60 a month. Depending on what job, like kitchen jobs usually pay more because it's a high turnover. Nobody wants to work in the kitchen. In some facilities they have jobs at different vocations, or auto body, or some type of vocation, and you don't really get paid for that, but you do get darn good time, and you can knock some time off your sentence. The other jobs that you might find in prison are, at the facility I work, they have a warehouse where they process their commissary. So those guys get paid an hourly wage, something like $1.25 an hour, something like that. And those are the best paying job inside the prison. Now, some inmates, if their classification is low enough, they go to what's called a work release. And a work release is basically, you're still incarcerated, but they actually they put a ankle monitor on you, a tether around your ankle, and then they come pick you up and they take you to an actual outside job. like at any job that any citizen would work at. It could be at a McDonald's, it could be at a lumber mill, or it could be at any place that will accept an inmate to work. So basically, you're still incarcerated, but you actually get to go out and work and make a living wage, like whatever they're paying McDonald's or whatever. If they're paying 10, 12, 13, 14, $15 an hour, that's what you make. But you're returned every day back to the facility. So you're out. Basically, you're free for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever the shift is. But then you return and you have to go back through the process of, they strip you out, they strip you down, they put you through a body scanner to make sure you're not smuggling drugs or anything like that. And you do that every day. And that process happens every day. You get transported by van or whatever. They come and pick you up, process you out, process you in at the end of the day when you come back through. Um, a lot of guys that get into the work release part of it, they they screw it up because they either go out, get hooked up with some idiot, start doing drugs or something to blow up that situation, and then they lose everything just because somebody talked them into trying to smuggle drugs back into the facility or something. But a lot of those guys they make good money, $15 an hour. They're bringing home what a regular person is, and it's a actual good situation for them if they do it right. The other difference between jail and prison is the commissary. In jails, a lot of times the product is limited to what you can get in jail. You get less options. But once you get to the prison side, and you go to a facility, they usually have a bigger selection just because they know that you know the inmates want to buy as much as they can buy. They want to um, get different things, and they're willing to pay for it. So variety is a lot better in commissary in prison than in jail. Um, the other big difference that from prison to jail is like the shower accommodations and bathrooms. Usually in the jail settings, they're more pods and cells, and you get a little bit more privacy because things are kind of blocked off a little better, and there's more privacy. In prison, the showers are more open setting where you might have six showers, and there's no shower curtains, stuff like that. So most inmates have a common practice where only one inmate goes in the shower at a time, and they kind of block off things with whatever they can block it off with, just so people are not you know gazing at them. I won't use the word that they use, but they're gazing in the shower. They might be some weirdo freak that gets off by walking in the shower and see a naked man showering and stuff like that. But they have protocols for that, and if you are one of those weirdos and you walk by, somebody might beat your ass because they're not playing that. Um, the other difference between jail and prison is the contraband. Usually, contraband in jail comes from a lot of times inmates will get arrested on the street and they come into jail with contraband on them or in them. Because a lot of times, you know, somebody might get arrested on the street or in a car and they'll swallow something or they'll stick something up their rectum or whatever, and somehow it gets through the process and it gets into the facility that way. Now, in prison, since all your people are already in there, the way they get contraband is they get it smuggled in, and they get smuggled in a few different ways. It's either through the visitation process, or they get it through a corrupt or compromised staff person, or something of that nature through the mail system or through something like that. Those are usually the three types of ways contraband flows in prison. It's it's a it's one of those things where any way possible they can think of getting it in, they get it in. And they'll go to extremes. They might have somebody drive up to your facility, try to drive as close as they can to the facility, and try to throw something over the fence into one of the yards, recreation yards where they're out, and they'll try to pick it up that way. But contraband flows differently from a jail than it does in prison because they're two different setups usually. And then one other difference between jail and prison is the cliques or the associations. A lot of times in jails, you know, you'll get a whole pod, or they'll just lump some people together, and there won't be very many of one association or one gang or whatever. So a lot of times in facilities that I worked in, um, they might click up by towns or cities they're from because that's their commonality or their associate, or they might click up by race, or they might click up by just the stronger guys will dominate the weaker guys. So those are the differences in prison and jail. And the last one I'll touch on is the movement. In jail, you have a lot more control and a lot more of, they just don't move around a lot. Because in jails, they just put them in whatever pods they have in their cells, and they don't do a lot. They don't do any outside recreation usually in jails. They usually have a little gym or a little rec area. They take them and they might go in there. But in prison, you have big yards and you have little yards, and you have a big gymnasium and things like that. So they get to move around and move outside more often than they do in jails, because in prisons, you got long-term inmates, so they're set up to be able to go out to the yard, which we call, there's a big yard and then we have like a center yard, and those yards have weight equipment, benches, barbells, all that kind of stuff. And they go out in these yards and they either walk. These yards are very large, and they got like a circular track or sidewalk where the inmates walk around. If you ever seen a TV show, seen inmates walking around these big yards areas, that's where they meet and that's where they congregate, is on these yards. And that's where your drug trafficking is. That's where your gangs, stake out their territories. They might even do a hit on the yard. There might be a fight or gang fight on the yard. So that's the difference between the jail and prison experience. And there's so many more differences. I don't have the time to name them all in this video, but I will come back to this. Put your comments down there and tell me what other things that you want to know about, what the difference between jail and prison is, and we'll do that in another video. But for this one, we're going to end it on that, and then we'll come back to it later. So put your comments down below. Tell me any more things that you would like to know about what's the difference between jail and prison, and we'll do another video on that. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the other side.